Our story begins on a Republic Venator above Yerbana, as alarms are beginning to blare throughout the ship. Anakin Skywalker and Ahsoka Tano both turn together to see Obi Wan Kenobi sprinting through the halls, coming right towards them. As he approached, Anakin wondered what this could possibly be for. For the last handful of months, Anakin has been isolated from the core worlds, isolated from Padme, as he and Kenobi have been assigned to battle after battle in the Outer Rim. Every day, it seemed like the war may be closer to ending, and at the same time, there was no end in sight. Dooku and Grievous were still on the run. This mysterious Sith Lord, Darth Sidious, was out there somewhere, and of course, Maul was a thorn in the side of all of this. Just today, Anakin reunited with Ahsoka Tano, as she and Bo-Katan of Mandalore came to them with a plea for help. Mandalore was under rule from Maul. He was ruling from the shadows. The people were suffering. Bo brought Ahsoka here to ask for help, and Obi-Wan initially declined, saying the council would never approve. Not long ago, Anakin brought Ahsoka into a hangar to find Rex and many other 501st clone troopers with their helmets painted orange in honor of her. It was extremely moving for Ahsoka, as even after she left the war effort, the men still loved and respected her just as she did with them. But now, as Obi-Wan ran back into the hangar area, Anakin would learn that the war has finally reached a climax. The Separatists are attacking Coruscant, and they are being called back to rescue the Chancellor. Ahsoka couldn't believe it. She said the people on Mandalore need their help, and she completely expected Obi-Wan to have a Jedi response to this, but instead, his face was filled with many different emotions that she could not quite read. Obi-Wan looked to Ahsoka and to Anakin, and he told them that he will go to Mandalore. Anakin, surprised by this, told Obi-Wan that this doesn't seem like him. He asked if the council would approve of this mission, but Obi-Wan just said that he didn't have time to bring up Mandalore when the council contacted him. Even so, he could not live with himself if he allows Maul to rule Mandalore any longer. Anakin and Obi-Wan locked eyes, and Anakin quickly understood. The topic of Satine and Obi-Wan was off limits. Anakin knew something terrible happened when Obi-Wan went against the council to help her, but every time it was brought up, Obi-Wan turned cold. But today, Obi-Wan was finally acting on his true feelings. He was refusing to let Maul terrorize these people any longer. Satine's people. Anakin just turned to Ahsoka, saying he's gonna need some help on Coruscant without Obi-Wan there with him. Ahsoka couldn't help but smile a bit, as she said fine, she will fight one more battle. And Anakin said it was settled then. He, Ahsoka, and the 501st will go and save the Chancellor. Obi-Wan and Cody can take the 212th to Mandalore. Obi-Wan shook his head in disbelief, saying Mace Windu was going to kill him for this. But Anakin assured him that if he is still alive, after all the times he disobeyed the council, then Obi-Wan will be just fine. And Obi-Wan's expression softened as he told Anakin and Ahsoka that the Force will be with them. And with a final look, they all went their separate ways. While flying through hyperspace towards Coruscant, Anakin would contact Coruscant for an update on Palpatine and for a mission assignment. Mace Windu would answer to find Anakin and Ahsoka, and after Anakin explained everything, Windu decided he didn't have time to be mad at Obi-Wan. He just gave Anakin and Ahsoka the mission, and he told the two of them that the Republic will be relying heavily on them. While en route to Mandalore, Obi-Wan would spend the entire trip going over attack plans with Bo-Katan and Commander Cody. Working with Bo was interesting for Obi-Wan. Despite the difference in their personalities, Bo looked and sounded a lot like Satine, and in her will to fight for Mandalore, Obi-Wan could see that she, like him, was doing a lot of this to make up for lost time with Satine. There was a shared respect between the two of them, and as they came out of hyperspace, Obi-Wan put up his hood as Prime Minister Olmec was contacted. Kenobi planned to keep his identity hidden until he was sure of Maul's whereabouts, and the fleet of LAAT gunships and Mandalorian fighters would soon pierce the clouds, and the fighting would begin. Cody and the 212th took to the air. Obi-Wan would dive past them, saluting to Cody with a smile, telling his commander that he won't take out all of Maul's Mandalorians before he lands. Cody and the men loved a good challenge, and they ran into battle behind their Jedi general. Above Coruscant, much-needed reinforcements would finally arrive. Chancellor Palpatine was captured by General Grievous and brought aboard the Invisible Hand flagship, and as the 501st clones took to the space battle and handled cannons inside of the Venators, 2 Jedi starships would spin out into the chaos. "Stay close, Snips," Anakin said through the comms, looping his fighter into a tight spin and blasting one of the droids off of her tail. She smirked, banking left, skimming to the surface of a burning Republic cruiser, firing through a dozen buzz droids, trying to get inside. She shot back at Anakin, telling Skyguy that he's lucky to have her here, flipping her fighter upside down to dodge debris. Anakin laughed, diving straight into the storm, weaving through the fiery wreckage of many starfighters. His targeting computer blinked red as 2 tri-fighters locked on, but Ahsoka swooped between them, flipping her ship in reverse and firing head-on, destroying both with ease. They burst through a cloud of wreckage, staring down now at the Invisible Hand, and as they moved move through the battle, the two starfighters would dive right towards the Separatist flagship at full speed, engines screaming, and before long, they would fly right into the hangar. Both leapt out of their fighters, and they began the search for Palpatine. Back on Mandalore, the initial siege of the planet had driven Maul's Mandalorians deep into the sewer systems. Cody and the 212th were among the best clones in the entire war, and with the help of Bo-Katan and their allies, stopping them would not be easy. Deep in the sewers, Maul waited in the deepest of the shadows, eyes closed, feeling the dark side of the Force overtaking the galaxy, as if the suns itself were burning out. Something was coming, and in his visions, Maul had seen clone troopers firing at Jedi, and the lone man standing in the end had been Anakin Skywalker, blade raised, standing in front of thousands of dead Jedi. Maul concluded that Darth Sidious planned to use Anakin and the clones to take over the galaxy. It was genius, but Maul orchestrated this takeover of Mandalore, hoping that Bo and Ahsoka would bring Anakin and Obi Wan here so he could kill them and destroy Sidious's plans. And yet, as Maul felt into the Force, he began to realize that Anakin Skywalker was not here, and yet there was a familiar presence, one he could never forget, one he hated above the rest in the entire galaxy. And through the sewers, Maul heard the soft footsteps as Obi-Wan Kenobi traced the systems to find Maul's hideout. Obi-Wan removed his hood, ignited his lightsaber, and told Maul that it's time they settle this once and for all. Maul slowly began pacing the sewers, telling Kenobi he was hoping he'd come here, but he was also hoping for Skywalker. Obi-Wan's eyebrows raised as he asked Maul what he wants with Anakin. Maul just said, "It's simple. He wants to kill him, of course. Kill him, so Sidious cannot fulfill his plans of turning the galaxy into an empire, with Anakin by his side." Obi-Wan held up his blade, asking Maul why he would reveal any of this to him if it were true, and Maul laughed softly before saying that Obi-Wan won't live to tell anyone about it. And Maul ignited both sides of his blade, flying in at Obi-Wan, striking against him, and another battle between old rivals would get underway. But back above Coruscant, Ahsoka Tano would be slowly waking up from being unconscious. She and Anakin just took on Dooku after he confronted them on their rescue mission. After a quick fight, Dooku choked Ahsoka nearly to death, but Anakin interfered just in time to ensure that Ahsoka was only knocked out. Now, as she woke up on the cold floor, she looked over as Chancellor Palpatine barked at Anakin to do it, and Anakin snipped a red and blue blade across Dooku's neck, killing him. Ahsoka froze. So did Anakin. Both of them knew that Anakin just killed a helpless prisoner in cold blood, but Anakin just freed Palpatine, helped Ahsoka to her feet, and said that they have to get out of here. Neither of them really spoke as they ran the halls of the Invisible Hand. An escape was now the only thing on their minds, but that would soon be delayed as General Grievous had them captured and brought aboard the bridge of his ship, where he planned to personally destroy all three of them. But Anakin had a plan. R2 shot their lightsabers to them. Anakin and Ahsoka caught their sabers and ran at Grievous, who quickly split his arms into four. Anakin charged first, strikes aggressive, still laced with some of the rage that he used to destroy Dooku, driving Grievous back to the windows. Ahsoka darted around the side, taking down both Magna Guards in here, then flipping over to Grievous and slicing right through one of his lower arms before rolling backward to avoid a sweeping kick. Grievous pushed Anakin away, then lunged at Ahsoka, but Anakin jumped in, forcing them apart. Grievous twisted, slamming a steel knee right into Anakin's chest, hurled him backwards into a control console. Sparks erupted as Anakin crashed hard, momentarily dazed. Ahsoka leapt towards him, but Grievous's clawed hand shot out, seizing her right by the throat. She slashed upwards, cutting a line across his armor, but it only tightened Grievous's grip, raising one of his saber hilts to her head as she was dropped to her knees. Anakin got up to save her, but Grievous dragged Ahsoka past a scared Palpatine, and the general would drag her out of the room before glaring right at Anakin. Grievous told Anakin that if he follows, then Ahsoka dies. Anakin had fury burning in his eyes, looking at his Padawan. She kicked and twisted, but he punched her in the face to stop her struggle, and Anakin could only watch as the doors were closed. Palpatine told Anakin that this ship is about to explode. They would be wise to get out of here, but Anakin already sliced a hole in the floor and was going to take a shortcut to the escape pods. But still, he would be too late. Grievous sprinted all the way to the pods, ejecting from the ship with Ahsoka as his prisoner. He flew up to a Separatist ship that was about to evacuate, and all Anakin could do was quickly guide Palpatine down to the escape pods, ejecting just before the entire ship was destroyed. Anakin felt numb, angry, devastated, all of the emotions that Palpatine needed him to embrace. And back on Mandalore, Obi-Wan would go crashing through a set of barrels, gathering himself as Maul continued his approach. Their duel had taken them from the sewer system through the street level, and now into a storage wing of the Mandalorian palace. Obi-Wan's robes were burned and torn, breath ragged, but as Maul flew back in, his strikes were still sharp and strong. Maul's double blade carved arcs of red right through the walls as Obi-Wan ducked low beneath a horizontal sweep, driving a kick into Maul's leg that sent him crashing into a rack of armor. Obi-Wan lunged in, but Maul retaliated with a savage backhand, catching Obi-Wan across the jaw, and he leapt up onto a crate, spinning both blades downward. Obi-Wan parried, and he was knocked back a few steps, sparks bursting between them, and Kenobi used the Force to hurl Maul backward through the doorway and out onto a winding staircase above. Maul was getting back to his feet as Obi-Wan walked through the door, wiping blood from his mouth, and finally, he spoke, telling Maul they don't have to do this. Together, they can take down Maul's real enemy, Darth Sidious. Maul snarled, saying everyone is his real enemy. He needs to see the Jedi and the Sith burn. They battled their way up the stairs, sabers clashing in bursts of blue and red light as the duel was off balance on these winding steps. And with dialogue now open, Maul yelled down at Kenobi that he has no clue what it's like to be ripped away from his family. He was torn away from his mother and his brothers, something Obi-Wan could never understand. Maul was hammering blows down that forced Obi-Wan to stay back, but he yelled up that Maul is right. He never had a mother or a real family, at least not that he remembered, but that doesn't mean he doesn't understand love or pain. He loved Qui-Gon, he loved Satine, and Maul took them away. Obi-Wan said that he knows why Maul truly hates him. It's because he's jealous that Obi-Wan didn't succumb to the horrors of the dark side after Qui-Gon's death. Jealous that Obi-Wan doesn't live in constant suffering like Maul, and Maul yelled in fury as Obi-Wan sidestepped a brutal slash, deflecting it into the stone wall. Obi-Wan pushed him through another door, and they burst into the main palace room, the room where Satine had fallen. As Maul got to his feet, Obi-Wan continued to talk, saying Maul wants to destroy him because he doesn't understand him. He doesn't understand how Obi-Wan, even after watching Qui-Gon and Satine die, stays in the light. Maul kept himself alive in the worst planet in the galaxy, solely with his rage at Kenobi, because Obi-Wan is stronger than him. Maul grew desperate, driving Obi-Wan across the polished floor, sabers locking and breaking apart again and again. Obi-Wan spun low, slicing Maul's blade in half, and Maul countered with a savage elbow right to Kenobi's ribs, but Obi-Wan just absorbed it, pivoted, then struck a clean arc that knocked Maul's lightsaber from his grip. Maul stumbled backward as Obi-Wan pressed forward, landing a kick square to his chest. The impact sent Maul crashing into the tall glass window beside the throne. It shattered, sending shards spiraling into the wind. Maul dangled on the edge, one hand gripping the edge, and Obi-Wan stood over him, the night air howling through the broken glass window. Maul was accepting his fate. This was his end. But as he looked back up, Obi-Wan had extinguished his lightsaber, and he was holding out a hand, telling Maul he can still make the right choice. He can still take down his true enemy, the one who brought him into this life of pain. Together, they can take down Darth Sidious. Maul, with his hand slipping, was forced to choose between falling to his demise or siding with Obi-Wan Kenobi. He closed his eyes, almost laughing at the circumstances, and he thought of home, his mother, his brothers. It was Sidious who took everything from him, and right as Maul slipped, he reached out and Obi-Wan would help him up. They both collapsed to the floor, completely exhausted, and Maul told Obi-Wan he will bring the two of them right to Darth Sidious. On Coruscant now, Anakin Skywalker's head felt like it was completely ringing. He just returned Palpatine to the executive building, but all he could think about was how helpless he was as Ahsoka was dragged away by General Grievous. And despite wanting to return to Coruscant for months, despite waiting desperately to see Padme, he knew what had to be done. He knew he had to take off and see Ahsoka before it was too late. Grievous was going to be keeping her alive as leverage now that the war was falling apart. So Anakin just silently apologized to Padme in his head, and immediately he got back into his ship, calling up the current investigation for General Grievous. The Republic had tracked the ship that he took off on into the southern sector of the Outer Rim. Right now, it was suspected that he was on one of the planets in a group of Elrud, Seatos, Dagobah, Utapau, Kirdo, Valdo, or Sluis Von. Clone troopers were being sent to a few of these planets at a time, and Anakin decided to investigate the planets that the clones had not yet moved into. Anakin would jump to hyperspace, first for Dagobah, and in hyperspace, moving through the galaxy towards Coruscant, Obi-Wan Kenobi and Maul were sitting in Maul's ship together in an extremely uneasy silence. Both of them knew that this should not work. Years of history have brought them nothing but fighting, but Maul was letting himself focus fully on Darth Sidious. Whatever happens between him and Kenobi, once Sidious is dead, would be settled later, and Obi-Wan was silencing the memories in his mind of Satine and Qui-Gon dying from a lethal stab at Maul's hand. Maul had just informed him that Sidious was Palpatine, and Obi-Wan knew that this had to be finished by him and Maul. If he tried contacting Coruscant, then Palpatine might intercept the transmission and be able to escape. So the two of them put their many differences to the side, preparing for a final fight. On Utapau, Darth Sidious was contacting Grievous. He was just informed that Anakin joined the search for Grievous, and while frustrating, Sidious knew that they could use this, and he would tell Grievous to execute Ahsoka immediately. When Anakin arrives to find her dead, his descent into the dark side will be nearly complete. Grievous would say it will be done. He would end the message, and the droid general would march down to the prisoner area of this separatist base. The doors slid open with Grievous ready for another Jedi kill, but inside of this cell, it was empty, aside from broken handcuffs and the remains of 4 Magna Guards. Grievous roared in anger, and he commanded all droids here to search for Ahsoka and kill her on sight. In space, Anakin would fly quickly through Dagobah, finding nothing except for extremely strong waves of the Force, perhaps a planet to explore later in life. But with this first planet coming up empty, Anakin would then take off for Utapau, the next planet on his list. And almost immediately upon entering, Anakin would know that this was the right place. There were battle droids moving throughout the streets, clearly hunting for someone. Anakin carefully landed his starfighter in a hidden landing pad, slowly getting out of it, and he prepared for a long search for his Padawan. Anakin scouted the sinkhole, the cliffs, the waters, and he knew this could take hours. But, of course, just a second later, a familiar voice would pop up right behind him. It was Ahsoka, cheekily telling Anakin it took him long enough. Anakin ran at Ahsoka, hugging her tightly, handing her 2 lightsabers, saying it's well past time that they destroy Grievous together. Back on Coruscant, Sidious got an update from Utapau that Ahsoka somehow escaped, and he was filled with rage. How could Grievous, such a fool, not be watching over her constantly? He just told Grievous to find and kill her, or he will face consequences like Dooku. The communication ended, and Sidious stood alone in his base on Coruscant. Within the next day, he planned to execute Order 66. The galaxy would soon be his to rule. As Emperor, he just needed that final push to bring Anakin to his side. But as Sidious was in this base, thinking about it all, he heard a ship fly into the hangar, and he looked over to see perhaps the most unlikely duo in the entire galaxy. Kenobi and Maul were here, and they ignited their sabers, looking over to the Sith Lord. And on Utapau, Anakin and Ahsoka climbed the sinkhole together, finding Grievous's base, and therefore finding him. And 2 grand duels would begin at the same time. In the Coruscant lair, lightning would flash towards both Kenobi and Maul as they dove out of the way. Maul's double blade spun into battle, while Obi-Wan flowed around him, the 2 striking in shockingly perfect strikes together. Sidious twirled his own saber, with speed laced with darkness, strikes jagged and unpredictable. Maul would lunge low, dragging one blade across the metal floor, throwing sparks into Sidious's face, while Obi-Wan flipped above him, bringing his saber down in a vertical strike. Sidious caught it mid-air as his power flared, blasting both away in a wave of lightning that sent them crashing through a wall. Maul recovered first, leaping forward with a spin that deflected another strike, while Obi-Wan rolled under Sidious's follow-up slash, driving his saber right towards the Sith Lord's side. Sidious twisted enough to avoid it, realizing that this duo knew each other so well from their many fights that they knew how to fight together. And on Utapau, Anakin and Ahsoka dashed across the circular base, clashing against Grievous's whirling arms. He advanced with all 4 arms slashing in different directions, spinning wildly into the metal ground, forcing them to split. Anakin jumped high onto a ledge, diving down into a spinning strike as Ahsoka rolled beneath Grievous's swing to slash one arm off at the elbow. Grievous countered by spinning, landing a kick that sent Ahsoka skidding across the floor, and this time, Ahsoka reached out and pulled Grievous down with her. Anakin seized the opening, slashing through another arm. Grievous turned, locked blades with Anakin, just as Ahsoka reappeared behind him, slicing forward with both sabers carved into an X across his back plating. Anakin struck as Grievous stumbled, stabbing through his heart, and he died in a pile of flames. Back on Coruscant, Sidious would be slashing for Maul's throat, but Obi-Wan intercepted the strike, pivoting to drive Sidious backwards. Maul followed, slamming his saber into Sidious's wrist, kicking his knee out from under him. Sidious retaliated with a force blast, hurling Maul against a support beam as he crashed to the floor with broken bones and blood trailing from everywhere. Obi-Wan charged, ducking under a streak of lightning, but Sidious thrust both hands forward, catching Obi-Wan with the force. Sidious was able to lift Kenobi into the air, choking him, and he pushed his lightsaber forward for the killing blow. But it never struck Obi-Wan, as Maul used his remaining strength to get in the way. The stab went through Maul, and Kenobi didn't waste the moment, dropping, swinging through Sidious's chest. Both Maul and Sidious fell to the floor, and Obi-Wan caught Maul, holding him up the same way that he did with Qui-Gon and Satine, and Maul just muttered that he'll finally get to see his family again, and he died here in peace. Obi-Wan closed Maul's eyes, and prepared to tell the galaxy the truth of Palpatine. 1 year later, the war had ended, the Senate had reformed under new leadership, and Padme Amidala stood at the heart as Chancellor of the Republic. She guided the Republic in peace, with a calm but strong voice. Luke and Leia were raised by her, and Anakin next to the Naboo Lakes. Anakin would hold them as a father, learning what it meant to rest. Ahsoka Tano had returned to the Order as a knight. She and Anakin often crossed paths on diplomatic missions as guardians of a fractured galaxy. On Mandalore, the planet was slowly finding peace under Bo-Katan's leadership. Obi-Wan visited often as a friend. The clones had found a new purpose as protectors and citizens, and through it all, the Jedi and the Force had begun to breathe with light again. And folks, that was our story for today. Hope you guys enjoyed. The whole thing was kind of based on, I wanted to do a story, what if Obi-Wan and Maul kind of joined together? I was never going to, I don't think I'm going to title it that, just because it doesn't happen until like the last bit of it, so don't want to spoil that. But yeah, really wanted to explore that dynamic. I've done it before, but just doing it in this scenario was, I don't know, more interesting, and that's kind of what the whole story was based off of. And also getting Anakin off of Coruscant there to go help a captured Ahsoka. I thought it was a fun, I don't know, twist on what we usually do, so I enjoyed that. Hope you did as well. Let me know what you want to see next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.